Good morning. Thanks so very much for the invitation to present this research today. It's work with my colleague, Jason Seligman, who's sitting right there in the middle, and he's going to help me with all the hard questions. So, just find him in the end. So what we wanted to do is take a look at how preferences and circumstances influence what happens to households as they go through the retirement path. And retirement's sort of really a path that has many decision points along the way, and things happen along the way. And so we look at when you retired, how did you feel? Did you feel forced? Did you want to retire? Was it some combination of that? And we actually ask a question directly about what do you plan to do with your retirement assets? How do you plan to tap those accounts? And then finally, using the HRS, we delve into how does individual wealth actually evolve over retirement, building a comprehensive balance sheet where we have de-annuitized Social Security and made it an asset on the balance sheet, taken the DB and made that an asset on the balance sheet, pulled in all of the DC plans that were left behind in the RAND FAT files from the FAT files and put them onto our database. So we've got really a full picture of what the wealth is. We will follow that over a couple of decades in retirement. So when we think about sort of the preferences versus circumstances, you know what circumstances are. That's the shock that comes along, widowhood or financial market shocks, labor shocks, health shocks. We actually have in here sort of a funny one, education of your mother. You didn't get to choose your mother, but it turns out her education has a big impact on your wealth in retirement. So that variable found its way into circumstances here. There's also sort of a problem with, there's kind of a mix between the two. I might want to be married to someone, but they might want to divorce me. So that's their preference, but it's sort of my circumstance. There's health-related issues, workforce participation, and then whether I felt forced to retire. And then there's the things where we really might be able to move the needle in terms of helping people plan, helping people get some financial literacy, education, live a healthy lifestyle. We've heard a lot about that over the yesterday and today as well. So I think that we're trying to put things in these buckets, but there is a lot of overlap between sort of preference and circumstance. And so with regard to the question, when you retired, did you feel forced, want to, or a combination? We modeled this question off of an HRS question, and we asked it in ICI's annual mutual fund shareholder tracking survey, which is a survey actually of 9,000 US households. We asked it of the folks who had said they were retired, and in the ICI survey, you're retired if you say you retired from your lifetime occupation. You could still be working, full-time, part-time, whatever. We ask a separate question. Do you feel retired from your lifetime occupation? And so what we see here, we look at this question in terms of by income, by household, and then by household wealth. And what we see is actually most of the retirees in our survey said that they actually wanted to retire at the time that they retired, so 66%. We've got 17% said, I felt purely forced. I really felt forced, shoved out the door. And then 17% it was a combination. And the thing to notice on this chart is the pattern varies by household income. So our lower income households are more likely to report retirement was a forced decision rather than a desire, something they wanted to do at that time. Same pattern arrives when we look at financial assets. If I'm a household with fewer financial assets, I'm more likely to report that I felt forced out the door, forced to retire. We also asked about health status at the time of retirement, and we know from other surveys as well that this is a big deal, actually. So what we see here is that actually we have 40% say something with my health was very important or somewhat important to that decision to retire. And again, it's the lowest income households are more likely to report that health shock that sort of led to them needing to retire or choosing to retire. We also ask about, maybe you needed to care for family members. That might have been a factor of you had to step out of the labor force to do that. And we see 37% of the retired households said that was a factor that was either somewhat important or very important. And again, a little bit of a pattern here. The lower income are more likely to indicate that they needed to care for family members. We also had some work-related factors. I didn't like the work is actually one of our choices. So is that important to your decision to retire? And it's pretty even actually across the income distribution, which is sort of interesting. So a third said, yeah, I just didn't like that work, so that's why I wanted to retire. And then we had a question where we actually used the word normal retirement age, because we've had this question for a while, and we were kind of teeing off of what Social Security used to call the full retirement age was normal retirement age. So, and DB plans will mention that there's sort of a retirement age that, you know, they're anchoring the formula around, or you can leave at a certain point. And here we see that actually a good number of people felt that, that they were at the normal retirement age was why they were actually considering retiring, why they retired. And then, of course, there's the issue of lack of work. So I, was thinking about retirement, and it turns out I just couldn't get another job. And again, this is a bigger problem for my lower income households. So we take all of these variables and we put them together with a whole bunch of demographics, whether I have a DC account, whether I have an IRA, my age, my income, et cetera, and run a regression to see which of these factors are significant in the decision to retire and in the feeling forced to retire. So my left-hand variable is I felt forced to retire. It's a 0-1 variable. And then these are the variables that sort of popped up in terms of significance of the variables that are true at the time we surveyed you. So we find that age is negatively correlated, but it's a very small impact with feeling forced to retire. We see the income and financial asset effect that you'd expect. And we were surprised to see the DB plan popped up here. As if you have a DB plan, you're less likely to feel forced, and it may be because it suggested to you an age and a time at which you would actually retire. And then health, your current health, this is my current health status, so not my health at the time of retirement, but my current health status. What we see here is that if I have excellent health now, when you're talking to me today, I am much less likely to say I felt forced to retire, and that was the strongest coefficient, and it gets weaker as I go down to fair health. The omitted variable is poor health. But this makes sense, actually, because we found a high correlation between my health at the time of the survey and whether I reported a health problem back when I retired. So the health problem at retirement seems to be a bit persistent for these people. So we then added in the factors that were important when I retired, so those questions I just showed you. And what's interesting is I lose significance on a bunch of my other variables, because these things are now picking it up. And we have that if your health status was important to the decision, it's positive, so it's usually I had bad health, I felt forced to retire, I wanted to do other things, made me less likely to feel forced to retire. Didn't like the work, made me less likely to feel forced because, hey, I didn't like it anyway. Normal retirement age, again, having that anchoring of a place of an age at which to make this decision made me less likely to feel forced to retire. And lack of available work, if I couldn't get a job, I felt forced to retire. So we also added a question to our IRA survey. This is a survey of 3,200 households who own IRAs, just to ask them their future plans. And we'll do a bit more with this variable. At this point, just tab sort of what the answers were. We divided them into two groups here, not retired versus retired, to see if there's sort of a difference of what your thoughts are, when you're younger and not retired yet versus now I'm in retirement, and what's sort of the reality sinking in. And we see a lot of interest in delaying taking those withdrawals as long as possible, also preserving the balance to have a cushion to handle emergencies, and also this notion that I would only withdraw the investment return. So that's something that the younger, not retired, say, yeah, I would like to preserve, only take the returns out. We see the retirees get a little bit of a dose of reality. That may not always be the thing that you can do. So 60% of them say that's what they would try to do. In terms of the bridge idea, should I take withdrawals now so that I can delay Social Security claiming? Nearly half of the non-retired thought that sounded like a good idea, a good plan, but it was only only a fifth of the retired households. Immediately set up systematic withdrawals. The younger folks planning ahead think that's what they'll do. The older ones actually not as much. And then what if I want to purchase an annuity? We have a little bit of interest in that. And I just want to highlight, in terms of IRA owners, they actually, if I'm a traditional IRA owner, I wait till the government says, get out. So I wait until the RMDs kick in. And what this chart shows, and they pay attention to the age. So Secure increased the RMD age in 2022 to 72. Secure 2.0 increased it to 73. And so this was done in 2022, and we see the jump of distributions from traditional happens at that age. So they are watching that age, they're paying attention to that age. Roth IRA investors do not have RMDs during the original owner's lifetime. So they have a very flat pattern by age, and few of them actually take withdrawals. So next, I want to look at the HRS and see how does individual wealth evolve over retirement. I just want to ground this in, Jason and I have a prior paper that tracked household wealth through retirement, asking the question of, if when we met you, you were in a certain decile in 1996, what decile were you in a couple of decades later? So in this, we've extended it out to 2020. So Perturba, Venti, and Wise asked a different question. They were like, if you end up poor, where did you start? We're asking, if you started here, where are you when we see you later? And so this is percentages by row, and just highlights, so the upper left corner there is 46% of those who were in the lowest decile stayed there. If I go to the other extreme, the top decile, we have 45% of them maintained being in that top decile at the beginning and the end. And the diagonal just highlights that I stayed within my decile. So my relative position in the wealth distribution was maintained. So we say 54% of these individuals stayed within one decile where they were, because if you put a little toe over the line, that's not that big a deal. But sort of encouragingly, 82% of them did that or actually improved their decile over time. So this is just gives us a sense of what happens to that total wealth as we look over these aging households. And so we ran a regression to look to see what factors influenced what my decile was, what my total wealth was, and again, we have this full comprehensive balance sheet that's got Social Security, DB, everything on it as well, and then what my retirement wealth was, and then looking at a bunch of variables to sort of see, well, what's correlated with outcomes here. Again, in terms of circumstances versus preferences. So we see education is good, which is good to hear, given we're sitting here, at a university, so always a plus. Number of years of education improves my decile situation. And here we have where you didn't get to choose your mother, but her education proves to be a significant positive influence. And then we included the financial literacy, big three were included in one sort of wave of this. It was only 200 observations, but still got a nice result there of a positive impact. Health, again, if bad health is a bad event. And on the really positive side, planning horizon. The longer your horizon, and this is something we can teach people, the better it is for their wealth, all three of these variables. And even if I wasn't a good planner when you first met me, if I improved over the time period, that actually helped me a lot as well. So I have some numbers here, which for the sake of time, we will skip, but we saw some of these numbers are really quite significant in terms of what it does to your assets, both your retirement wealth and your total wealth. So the key takeaways really from the decision point of deciding to retire, we had only 17% said they were purely only felt forced to retire. There were 2 negative circumstances that were statistically significant and positively correlated with feeling forced, and that's I had a health problem and there was not work for me. So those are 2 shocks that can happen. Reaching normal retirement age seems to be an anchoring for people and makes them less likely to feel they were forced to retire. And then we have just preferences. I didn't like the work, or I wanted to do something else, and that made me feel less forced to retire as well. In terms of the evolution of wealth in the retirement, the forced retirement is negatively correlated with both my total wealth and my retirement wealth. So that issue happening back at the time of retirement is a persistent problem for folks. So the same fair to poor health is negatively correlated with my total wealth, and then higher education, higher financial literacy, these are things people can improve on, is positively correlated with wealth. The longer planning horizon, again, easy thing to teach people to think longer term, is positively correlated with total wealth and retirement wealth. And once again, no matter how short it was, if we can improve it, we can improve your situation. So thanks so very much. Look forward to the discussion.